Okay, so we've made a start on the verbs. We've looked at it's quite a simple start. It's step one, baby steps, but we're there and we're using and reading Greek. And having made a start on the verbs, we now need to start on the nouns. And naturally enough, that's the next thing that Duff covers in chapter 2. So we're looking at nouns. So let's have a look at what we can learn from nouns. A little bit of grammar we need to be looking at in this. Possibly it's very obvious, but I want to go through it just in case it's not. So we need to look at these nouns, and we're going to create what the chapter title actually says, which is simple sentences. So let's have a look, first of all, at a very, very simple, very basic English sentence. So we might have a sentence such as this: the master has a slave. I'm choosing these words because they're words that are included in the Greek that Duff is going to be using, and we're going to be introduced to those words. But here's the simple sentence. And I hopefully am reminding you that they have a function within the sentence. Each part, each word or group of words has a function within the sentence. So you have a subject, the verb itself, and the object. They're defined really in their relation to the verb. So the master is the subject of the verb. It's the person or the thing or the object that is doing the stuff. And the slave is the thing that's affected by the verb, and so it's the object. So subject and object. And quite probably when you were at school, you learnt about subject and object and how that structures in the sentence. So hopefully I'm not telling you anything new. But if I am, it's not that difficult. And if we change the order of words, we change the sense. So I've just turned them round. Doesn't actually work, does it? A slave has the master. But if we tidy that up a little bit, the slave has a master. But because we've changed the order, we've changed the sense. So the slave has now become the subject, and the master has now become the object. And what that's telling us is that in English, the word order is extremely important. It has a grammatical implication as well as a visual implication, if you like. So the position of the noun determines, to some extent at least, its function. Sometimes we can change word order, and it does still change things, but not the meaning. The slave a master has. I would guess that might just be possible in some kind of poem or in a particular context. But it would be very unusual, slightly weird. So position is everything. Let's have a look at that same sentence then. The master has a slave. We've gone back to the beginning. And let's look at it in Greek. So that was the English. This is the Greek. Now, in fact, I've left out the, which you can do in Greek, but more of that at another time. And I've missed out the which we have to do in Greek. More of that in a moment. And so we end up with kurios eche doulon. Master has a slave. But notice, if we change it round, if we put the other sentence in, the slave has a master, where we've changed the word order, we have changed the word order, doulos eche kurion. But notice that although we've changed the position of the words, the os seems to stay where the subject is, and the on tends to stay where the object is. Okay, so actually in Greek, the function of the word is not really marked by its position, but by its ending. Just as we saw with the verbs, where the verb ending gives you grammatical information, the word ending here gives us grammatical information. So the os is telling us that it's subject, and the on is telling us that it's object. Okay, so let's summarize that. So kurios means that the Lord is the subject. Kurion means that the Lord is the object. And this is going to have quite a big significance as we explore Greek and learn a little bit more. I have to tell you that, as is always the case with Greek and Latin and these more academic languages, they have specific words for this. So they don't use subject and object, they use nominative and accusative. But it means the same thing. So nominative is when a word is used as the subject, and accusative is when the word is used as a direct object. So nominative, kurios, accusative, kurion. Okay? And so there we have the summary of it, but I've added a little because I've taken the master and the slave. What if there was more than one of them? So we've added the plural. And the word ending, the shape of the word ending tells you not only whether it's the subject or the object, whether it's nominative or accusative, but it also tells you whether it's singular or plural. And you can see we've got these additional plural forms. So if we have the masters being the subject, it's kurioi, and if it's the masters being the object, then it's kurious. Okay? And so we naturally give you an example. The masters have slaves, kurioi eche doulos. So again, you're not really told which is which by the position in the sentence. You're told everything by what marks the end of the word. Now, we've kind of I've skirted around the issue about the definite article. So I'm going to add some information about the definite article. Just as the noun can be either nominative or accusative, it can be either the subject or the object, and it can be either singular or plural, so can the direct object. And so the direct object, the definite article. The definite article has to agree with the noun. So if you've got the master, he's a nominative and singular, you have to use the ho. So it's ho kurios. If it's the masters, it's hoi kurioi, and so on. So ho kurios phile ton doulon, the master loves the slave. In both cases, we've got definite articles, but we know which one is the subject and which one is the object, which one is the nominative, which one is the accusative, by the word ending. If the master loved all his slaves, then it would be ho kurios phile tous doulos, because it would be plural. In fact, Greek does not have an indefinite article. So if it's in fact the Lord loves slaves, then you would say ho kurios phile doulos. In fact, they would consider that as a general statement, and therefore it's fairly definite anyway. So there's quite a lot of playing around with the article, and sometimes the Greek language will do things in a different way from English, but we're into the sophistication there, so it's not important. Okay, so what we've learned is that there are 4 forms that we have to think about: nominative, accusative, singular, and plural. That the word position is less important than the actual structure of the word and the word ending in particular. And so if we look at the whole issue about sentence order, we learnt that the position of the subject and the object in English is vital, and we've certainly learnt that we can say the same in Greek. But we've also learnt that we can change that order around. So if I wrote ho kurios doulon eche, it would mean exactly the same thing. Sometimes the difference in position might give you some kind of difference in nuance or implication. But in general, you can move words around. You can even move them around extremely. So here we've actually got the object coming before the subject. Perfectly acceptable in Greek. Not so common, but perfectly acceptable. So there we are. We've looked at the use of the subject and the object of nouns. We've learnt the word endings, both of singular and plural, and it'd be worth you reading through all those sections in Duff. He does it in a slightly different way, and hopefully the two of these together will give you a better window on those words. But not just for the part of the chapter that explains what we've been looking at. Don't forget to do the exercises as well. We've covered a number of his sections, so there's a few exercises that it would be good for you to do. Remember to check the answers in the back of the book. We've reached the end of the chapter, basically. So there's not only the individual exercises at the end of each little kind of section part, but there's a whole load at the back of the chapter, at the end of the chapter. And in fact, it's section A and section B. And I'm not sure about this chapter, I haven't checked, but there's sometimes a section C as well. And in the English version, if I remember rightly, there are answers to section A in the back of the book, but not B. And the idea is that if you have a tutor, then they can set you section B and mark that properly. It's a kind of a proper testing process. So certainly do section A, do all those at the end of each little subsection, and then do section A, check the answers. And if you've got answers that kind of are basically the same, but vary slightly, don't be worried by that. Translation is not an exact science, and often variations are perfectly correct. For example, you might have a particular set of words where the answer that's given in the book is the master frees the slave, and you've written the master is freeing the slave. Well, the present tense can be continuous or it can be simple, so your answer isn't wrong. There's a question of also, if you like, what feels more natural, and fair enough, that's a kind of discussion that you can have, and it's good to have. But don't get too worried about, an absolute exact match with what Duff has said for the translation. Look for the sense. Make sure you understand. If he's got something different from yours, make sure you understand that difference. If that difference is significant, if it means that you've misunderstood some grammatical element, learn from it. If in fact they're just nuances and just differences of interpretation, then you've got it right. End of discussion. So don't be too worried. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I hope you get a lot of value out of what you're doing. And, we're launched. And every time we do a little bit more, it's going to be that little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more depth of understanding that we'll gain. But we've started. And, we've looked at some words. I think we started with logos. I don't know. Certainly Duff have logos in. And some of these are words you've probably heard in sermons, people talking about. And as you look them up in dictionaries, you can look up meanings, and they already will start enriching your reading of the Bible. I hope that's exactly how you feel.